So, what does this all mean for us? Well, we, like the great martyrs, like Saint Demetrius, the great martyr, we have to go both on the defensive and the offensive, right? What do I mean by that? Well, first off, like the martyrs of the church, we have to resist. We have to fight back. We have to resist valiantly. We have to say, no, I'm not going to do this today. I'm not going to judge that person. I'm not going to look with fornication or adultery against that person. I'm not going to boast of my good works. Say I'm not going to do this, that, and the other. Right? We have to resist. We have to put up a fight. Right? We have to put up a fight to resist those temptations. But we also have to go on the offensive. We have to fight back. We have to shoot back our bullets at the enemy, right? We are all soldiers for Christ. We're all soldiers. When you became an Orthodox Christian, were baptized in the font, and you became an Orthodox Christian, you became immediately a soldier for Jesus Christ. You are a soldier. I'm a soldier. We're all soldiers for Christ. Christ is our general. He's our captain, if you will. And we are in the midst of a spiritual warfare every day of our lives, every second of our lives. We're in a war, we're in a battle. Unseen Warfare. Get that book. Really good book. Unseen Warfare. And does the soldier just sit, behind the barracks and just take cover? No. That's part of it. But he also takes his machine gun and he fires back. Right? He fights back. He shoots the enemy in return. He takes his gun and he takes those grenades and he's firing back. It's the same way for us. We have to fight back. We have to shoot the enemy down. Right? We have to go on the offensive, right? And we have to slay our passions. We have to kill our passions. We have to deaden the old man within us. We have to squash our ego. We have to, I don't know how else I can put it. We have to murder our passions, okay? We have to become dead to our passions, right? And in the church, for every passion there is a specific methodology that we can follow to overcome those passions. And this is why we need a spiritual father, why we need a guide, because just as you have a doctor, right, who tells you how to overcome this sickness and gives you the proper medicine for that sickness, or in an army, right, you have generals and you have commanders and you have sergeants and you have captains and right, all these kinds of things, and they do what? They give you advice. Okay, this is how we're going to overcome the enemy. We're going to go this way. We're going to go that way. We're going to hit them from this way, or we're going to take this methodology. We're going to try this different tactic, right, to overcome the enemy. The same thing in the spiritual life is that with the help of our spiritual father and reading the writings of the holy fathers and the lives of the saints to get that advice we need, we're going to learn how to overcome our passions. In the church, we have general methodologies that all of us are supposed to do, right? Things like participate in the sacraments, fast, pray, etc., etc. But if you read the writings of the Holy Fathers, like St. John Climacus, Ladder of Divine Ascent, or St. John Cassian on the 8 vices or passions, or the 7 deadly sins for those in the West, um, there are practical things that we can do every day of our lives that are specifically curtailed to overcoming particular specific passions. So I'll give an example. If you struggle with the passion of lust, right, the saints tell you that you should do things like physical toil, prostrations, all night vigils, standing up in prayer, fasting, these kinds of things that kind of subdue those fleshly appetites and desires of the flesh, of the body, right? But let's say someone struggles with, let's say, with pride, or no, with anger, right? They get really angry with people. the saints are going to say, okay, well, fasting is important, but you should put more of an emphasis, more time and energy on things like silence, things like prayer, things like almsgiving, right? These things are will help you over here that you struggle with anger to overcome that passion, right? Put more of an emphasis on those things rather than on fasting or prostration. So doesn't necessarily mean that you don't do the fasting and prostration, but it means that you're gonna do things like silence and prayer and almsgiving more than the prostrations and such, because it's gonna help you overcome that particular passion that you struggle with, right? And so we all have a particular methodology for each particular passion of how to overcome that. If you want to learn more on that, you can go to my playlist on Orthodox spiritual life. We did a whole class, talked about all that passions and virtues. If you want to read, God willing, you do, of saints who talk about how to overcome certain passions, I would recommend reading St. John Climacus, Ladder of Divine Ascent. Talks a lot on these kinds of things, gives very practical steps on how to overcome particular passions. St. John Cassian on the, I think it's called the 7 or 8 deadly sins or vices, something like this. I'm sure you can find it. Who else? Maybe pick up the book called Orthodox Psychotherapy. That's also a very good book. It talks about some of these things. But ultimately, we should have a spiritual father that's going to help us with these matters, ultimately, right? So we resist, we fight. And also, let me mention one last thing before we go on, is what's our weapon? Our weapon, ultimately, the weapon, the fundamental number one basic weapon of a Christian is prayer. Prayer, 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 prayer. Pray. That's, it's, as we were talking about last week in our Jesus prayer class we just started. Hope you join us if you haven't already. Every Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern USA time. Prayer is our weapon. Prayer is the most essential thing in our life. If you don't pray, you hardly can be called a Christian. It's as natural and essential for a Christian as oxygen and water and food is for our daily survival. That's just how basic and necessary and important prayer actually is. All the more so is it important when it comes to things like spiritual warfare, right? And this is why the Jesus prayer is paramount, paramount, and the prayer rope is paramount in the warfare, because that is our weapon. That is our weapon. That's our AK-47. That's our pistol, right? That's how we overcome the demons, is through the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy. You're going to hear more about that in just a second. So ultimately, as we see on the screen here, ultimately, right, the more and more that we resist, the more that we overcome these passions, the weaker they become. And eventually we can reach a point where then we are totally freed. We're totally freed of those passions. We no longer struggle with lust or pride or judging or anger. Doesn't exist. We don't have those inclinations anymore, right? And that's what we call dispassion or apathia in the Orthodox Church, is dispassion. And there's degrees of dispassion, right? There's degrees of dispassion. If you want to hear about the 4 degrees of dispassion, go to St. Maximus the Confessor. We talked about that in the class that was recorded about purity of the heart, class 2, I believe. How do we attain a pure heart? It's in there. Go check it out.